Elevate your grind live from the Benzinga Cannabis Capital Conference, and I am going to stumble on that every time we do this. I am sitting down in the studio today with two great friends of mine. They are lawyers. They are well respected in the industry, so they can't actually be seen with me in public, but we figured we would make an exception here. Jon Robbins and Zach Kobrin of Akerman. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me.
Good to see you, Todd.
You guys have changed the view of lawyers for me in general, and I love it.
In a good way, I hope.
I think so. I mean, I used to think you guys were a lot stiffer than this is not going down a good path already.
We're trying to
comment on the high quality studio that you got us in.
We're trying to set the bar low.
Last year they had me under the escalator, so I'd like to think that this is a little bit of an improvement.
It's all because of Rob Friedman. Rob Friedman does all the work around.
Yeah. Well, I think the problem is we kept talking about them last year and they wanted to see themselves in the background here. I know you gentlemen are used to being on that big stage, but thank you for joining us in our little cubicle.
Always a pleasure.
I you know, the funny thing is I always find it weird that two of my good friends are like two of the most influential lawyers in the industry, because I always find it funny that I can sit here, I can bullshit with you guys, we can hang out, but then I see you fighting some of the biggest cases in the state of Florida and nationally, and watching you guys on weird Zoom, well, I don't know what the fuck you lawyers do. Court.
We do that.
Yeah.
We do some of that. By the way, I don't know if you got it on camera, but we have an addition here, another partner of ours, Ian Bacheikov from our Miami office.
Until he moved in a little closer to you, it looked like you had an imaginary friend.
Well, I do.
Ian,
we can all scoot over.
You're really gonna bring somebody in without setting up another micro? Can you do me a favor?
Ian and I can share.
I'm gonna bring Rob. Can you grab the other microphone? There's a cable and a mic in there.
You're gonna have to edit this whole part out, Rob.
No, this is the fun part. We're not gonna edit it out. We're just gonna add more guests.
It's fine.
Even better.
Todd, we could share a mic.
Yeah. Cool. What
No.
kind of shit show are you running here?
So somebody tell us about what you're seeing in the industry right now while I produce this show as well.
What we're seeing in the cannabis industry?
Yeah, because right now it's a lot of doom and gloom. A lot of people don't have money. You know, it is unfortunate out there.
Little, the movie?
I probably.
You ever seen Chicken Little, the movie?
Yeah, I have kids.
The sky is falling. The sky is falling.
It is. But is this something that, so I know we're getting serious here for a second.
Sky's not falling.
No.
Is it sad that I can have a serious conversation while I'm doing stuff, but the joking around I can't do? We're at a point in time right now where, you know, we had this artificial inflation from the pandemic. People had money, they're spending like drunken sailors, and now businesses actually have to focus on being profitable. This is what you guys are seeing? Is it a bad time or a good time?
We've got two things going on that are hitting at the same time that most people don't realize. One, we got a normal economic business cycle, right? It happens in any industry. It just happens that cannabis is an emerging growth. They all act like startups, right? Business goes up, business goes down. We saw this in 2019. There was a downturn. In other industries, you saw it after real estate in 2008. Another one you saw in 2012 with some other industries. The problem is that, like you said, the pandemic made cannabis artificially inflated towards revenues and profits and profitability. The problem is we've now got a correction plus an economic downturn. It'd be one thing if we were just dealing with correction. It'd be one thing if we were just dealing with an economic downturn. But we're dealing with them at the same time, which is making it hurt even more. So that's the reality of what we're seeing.
Yeah, and adding another layer on top of that, 5 years ago, you saw a tremendous amount of M&A activity in the space because people were basically getting themselves positioned for movement on the federal side and ultimately acquisitions. Nobody cared about revenue at that point. They just wanted to be in the right place at the right time, but the right time never came. So now all these people who started investing and over investing and paying unrealistic multiples in an industry that's really a startup industry straddled with a lot of challenges, including 280E and everything else. Now they're saying, okay, well, where's the revenue? Now we want to look at the revenue. And so the M&A activity sort of died down, and then sale leasebacks picked up and that sort of died down. And now we're in a stage where I think you're seeing, to the extent available, just a lot of debt financing.
Yep.
And money is expensive and it's hard to come by right now. So it's making it even more challenging for a challenging industry.
Can I just point out something, like most really important thing I've noticed so far? You should be sitting on this side. That's not your good side. I'm looking at you in the camera right there. It's just not a good side for you.
I have no good sides.
I think you look beautiful.
This is what we cut Ian off for you to tell me I have no good side.
No, go ahead.
Hey, listen, from what I see, not
I do
every
have a good side from what you see.
they're all good sides. I mean, that's why you set up a camera and sit in front of it in the first place. No, but listen, from what I see, there are some that did make it through, that didn't overspend, that had the money and did it the right way. And, in the part of the industry that I work in with my clients, I'm kind of seeing that last mile happening where they're finally getting their dispensaries open. They've got the stock, they've filled them up. And when they open, it flies off the shelves and they make money. So the idea that, there's money to be made here, it's there if you do it the right way, if you don't overspend, if you buy the license at the right price, you win the license. But you overspend, and we see many examples of that, of what happens next. You sell at a discount, you lose a lot of money, and someone else will get the benefit of that down the road.
Right. And all the while you're trying to service tremendous debt.
Yep.
Yeah.
By the way, why don't you tell them what part of the industry you actually work in?
Great. Yeah. So I help clients actually get the approvals for their local locations, their cultivation facilities, processing facilities,
Here's the top land use
dispensaries.
expert in the state. He's being modest.
I understood
Cannabis and otherwise.
Yeah, I have a gift for
and,
dumbing things
and
down.
alcoholic beverages as well.
Yeah, I do a lot of liquor licensing. So before cannabis became legal in Florida, that's all I did was alcoholic beverage law, liquor licensing.
He doesn't drink or smoke.
I tell you,
booze and weed, your parents must be proud.
So proud. I tell you, the first pitch I ever had to a license holder in Florida who needed to find locations and needed a land use attorney was simply that there are no experts in the state. It's a very new industry, and anybody who told you that was lying. What I did was the closest thing to it.
Not lying.
Well, that's because I didn't tell him I had any experience. Instead, I told him I did liquor licensing. I deal with the state to get the license. I deal with the local governments for the approvals, local planning boards, getting conditional uses, special exceptions. I mean, from a local level, people who don't know any better, which is most people who live in single family residential homes and are not card carrying, patients, look at this like it might as well be a liquor store or a strip club, right?
Yeah.
So you go in there and everybody's opposing you. They don't want it in their backyard. And no matter how well you explain it, they don't care. So overcoming that has kind of become the cornerstone of the practice.
What's crazy to me on that note,
And nobody's better.
well, not to cut the two friends
Thanks.
I have out here, but now that you brought new blood into the conversation,
Yeah.
what's crazy to me
We're
is
chopped liver.
It's okay.
4 years.
Like you said, there's a downturn.
I'm finally on it.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
realized you weren't there.
You get them on during the downturn, and my practice is not cyclical at all. So
Well, the interesting thing I saw is I was recently, probably a couple of months ago, at the Curaleaf Grow facility down in Homestead, Florida. And when you leave that facility, there are signs across the street that says Curaleaf does not care about us. They're polluting the environment with their smell of weed. And first of all, it doesn't. I wish it smelled like weed the way that they did, but I thought it was ridiculous. But do you see a lot of that? Is that more with grow facilities? Like, which is
no, not at
which is
all.
more pushback? Is
I mean,
retail or cultivation?
It's called NIMBY.
It's actually more retail, because the cultivation happens in agriculturally zoned areas where, Florida is great with farming. We basically say if you're a farmer, you could do whatever you want. You don't even need a building permit
People don't
to
live
build an
around.
agricultural
Yeah.
building, right? Yeah, you have a farm, it's usually 10, 20, 50 acres. Nobody's around you. You could put it right in the middle. Nobody's going to object. And even if they know about it and you have to submit for an application, you're not worried about neighbors objecting. You're worried about lobbying the commissioners who have to approve it, making sure they understand what's going into that application. You're not going to have a pungent smell going into your residential zones. What you're going to have is a facility that's going to create 50 to 100 new jobs for your local residents. And you got to see it as a good thing. They're activating. You're going to have more property taxes because of it.
Especially in Homestead. I mean, it's either grow weed or work in a taco truck.
There you go. As a matter of fact,
Well, somebody has to feed
I
people
was
who are
speaking
growing
with
weed.
one of the county commissioners. We had a meeting with a county commissioner yesterday, and one of the things she was saying was that the people who live down in Florida City, for instance, they don't have a public transportation option to get them to downtown where the jobs are. That takes less than 2 hours
Downtown
each
is a
way.
long-term part of the
But that's what happens is you keep the poor by keeping them away from where the good jobs are and giving them no option to get there because they can't afford to pay for parking and because there's no good public transportation option. So one of the good things they're doing is trying to create that public transportation to get them over here. But the other way to do it is get jobs closer to them. And this is the exact type of thing where you might not have any other industry trying to go and create jobs in that area. This is, and that's why it's a good thing, right?
I would agree. I'm seeing more problems on the retail side than the cultivation side. We represent tenants who run dispensaries, particularly in shopping centers. And that's where I'm seeing the complaints, not because they're not paying rent, but because they're taking all the parking, the smell, the people hanging around these dispensaries, people throwing packaging and products, you know, in the areas that people don't want. The neighboring stores don't want to deal with that stuff.
The reality though with retail is most of these retail, like especially in a state like Florida, most of these retail locations, actually take it back, in any limited license market, these retail locations are more secure than most banks.
Yeah.
The amount of
They are.
requirements.
They are.
They gotta be.
Well, those are the
They
best.
are, yeah.
Like the amount of requirements that these facilities have to undergo to get a license to operate, you know, it's astronomical. Most people don't realize it. The amount of video, surveillance, security, you know, access control, all of the different features that these facilities and retail undergo and undertake, you know, I would look at a Gap on, you know, or any other retail location is probably a higher threat for criminal activity than
I actually made this argument to city commission a few months back, saying, you know, the neighbors were complaining that it was going to create traffic. And I sat there and I told them to their faces, you put an ice cream shop in that same location, it's going to require more parking and create triple as much traffic as this location.
Yeah,
as a
try
dispensary
Starbucks. And
Yeah.
getting back to the earlier part of our conversation, all of these enhanced security protocols and requirements and regulatory burdens are again further affecting the margins for these companies. So they got to deal with 280E, they got to deal with security, they got to deal with regulatory issues that other companies just don't have to deal with, all the while not being able to transport products across state lines or engage in interstate commerce. So it makes it really
So
difficult.
we're all fucking psychopaths for working in this industry
But
because
it's
there's so many.
it's the greatest industry.
And I would agree with you. I would argue that a bigger disruptor of traffic and crowds and everything else would be both Starbucks and Chick-fil-A, which are two establishments I love. If you ever go to some of these there's a Chick-fil-A on
Can you imagine a dispensary next to a Starbucks next
every-
to a Chick-fil-A?
with a double drive-through,
Every
and,
Chick-fil-A.
pulling
There's
out
a
through into
Chick-fil-A
the
on
street.
Southern and 441
Yeah.
in a Home Depot parking lot that literally it gridlocks the parking lot, and the line they have to like comb through up and down. Like that is much more disruptive than
Same thing out by
Yes.
me. And I saw it in Colorado last week at In-N-Out Burger. So
most overrated,
further supporting
most
Ian's
overrated
argument.
burger chain in the world. That's right, California. I'm saying it. It is the most overrated chain in the
Oh,
world.
golly.
I'm not fighting words.
I'm stepping back from this one.
Wow.
What's crazy to me is I believe that the limitations that municipalities put on dispensaries makes it so they're all grouped together in the same area, which is a little nuts because it gives you a higher concentration of these dispensaries together.
I'll do you one better. Then they argue that there's too many dispensaries clustering and they don't want to approve anymore.
They don't have so if you go
Yeah.
West El Rey where I live,
Yeah.
Jogging and Atlantic Avenue, you have True Leaf, Surterra, Columbia Care Sanctuary, all literally within a pitching wedge of each other with 3G's Gourmet and
Well,
Deli,
I'll
but-
tell you what happens is they pass an ordinance allowing it because the state statute
Yeah.
gave them two options. Either you treat them like pharmacies or you prohibit them outright. So they don't want to prohibit them outright because they want to do what their constituents have asked. But what they do is then they limit it to only being allowed within certain zones within the city. And so they go by the existing zoning code that they have. Thank you.
That's the best.
And what that does is it creates only certain pockets within the city where they can go.
Yeah.
And many of those pockets may not be viable simply because there may not be any properties for rent, or the properties have institutional mortgages, so they can't have a cannabis tenant, or there's a residential neighborhood immediately adjacent and they're never gonna
This is the same thing.
allow
happened
this
with
to go
strip clubs.
But it's exactly what happens, right? And so you end up getting stuck in the one cluster where you
wouldn't
can
know.
actually get them approved. And next thing you know, you have 4 or 5 there, and the commissioners are saying, we can't do any more here because now there's a cluster, and they start denying any new ones. But that was the situation that they themselves created.
And it also doesn't help the fact that, like, especially in certain counties like Broward County in Florida, half the county, and that it's funny because that county, the ballot referendum legalizing marijuana in Florida passed by the largest margin, has the most restrictive cities in the state. The majority of the cities in Broward County all say no, they won't allow it. So you're forced to the same 2 or 3 cities, or the worst case is you have cities that just say state law be damned. We're going to have our own restrictions that are more strenuous than what the state allows. And if you don't like it, come sue us. And no one's going to go sue.
He's for.
Well, yeah, we don't sue the cities because the license holders want to make money. They don't want to spend money without getting anything for it. And if they sue a city, what's going to happen if they win is they're going to open it up for everybody, and no one else paid money for that lawsuit, right?
Right.
So
and the state's not going to do anything. The state won't do anything until someone sues, and then they have to intervene.
And there was one, we sued one city for one client, and you know what happened? That the city settled with us and let us open that dispensary
3 years later.
Personally, because I think they knew that if we went to trial, their entire ordinance would have been wiped out and it would have opened the floodgates.
They just let the one in.
So they let the one in. And of course, that client was happy because they knew they got in and no one else was getting in behind them.
Right.
So let's ask Todd, what do you see is going on in the industry? Let's interview you for a minute.
Oh, you interview me. I see a lot of good people getting laid off. I see the industry shrinking, and I see a lot of people that invested a lot of time and money finding themselves stranded. And the thing that bothers me about it is, if you look in this, LinkedIn is both great and terrible for this industry. Because one of the problems with this industry, unless you're specialized folk like yourself, is you're trying to feel your way out through the industry. You're trying to find a good spot for yourself. You're trying to find a good company that might be financially sound. And some people that you know are having 2, 3, 4, 5 jobs over a course of a 3 or 4 year period. And if you look at it from the outside in, like traditional, looking at what people do, it's like, well, that person can't get a job. It's like, well, no, they're in a bullshit industry where companies are going under. They can't afford people. They're cutting people. You have shitty people running them. And I worry now that you have all these people that went out on a limb, and by no means are they like the traditional market folks or the OGs that have come in and risked going to jail, but they risk reputation and everything else coming to this industry. And now I feel like they're stranded. So, from the man on the street version, like, it sucks that a lot of these companies are going under and a lot of investors are losing their money and everything else, but you have people that were making 40 grand a year, 50 grand a year hourly rates that are getting laid off, and it's like, what the fuck, what am I going to do now? And they had these dream jobs and they were working in it and they were passionate, but then all of a sudden they have to go, where are we going to go? Tech? They just laid off $1 million.
Well, I'll say, just between last week and this week, again, not everybody's shutting down and getting laid off. Between 3 license holders in Florida that we represent, I've gotten 4 new dispensaries, 3 open and 1 hopefully open tomorrow, between South Florida and Central Florida. So, the jobs are there and they need to keep hiring for the new locations they're opening. They might not be the $50,000-$60,000 a year jobs, but the hourly jobs in the industry,
Florida,
they're coming.
The majority of the jobs are retail jobs.
But that's also the benefit of Florida, because not every market is quite so lucky. And I have had more conversations about receiverships and ABC's, assignments for the benefit of creditors, because can't file bankruptcy, this Benzinga conference than I've ever had in any of these conferences that I've ever been to.
Has anyone, I don't even know what they're talking about on stage. Are people actually like optimistic?
I think listen, there's no reason to not be bullish on this industry, but it's definitely a difficult time.
Listen, this is one of those times where you will learn the companies that have strong management and strong balance sheets. That's what's going to show. Like I said this to you, and I said this to a few other people. I'm bullish on M&A this year. Yeah. And people look at me crooked. It's just going to be a different M&A. We're not looking at the $100 million acquisition. Well, I think what we're looking at is the roll-ups, right? I'm going to go buy 5 dispensaries at $4 million a piece in Illinois, right? I'm going to go spend, $20 million to buy 3 different operations in Arizona, rolling them up. It's going to be smaller M&A to consolidate. But that's the nature of any business.
Sure.
Cannabis is not unique in that concept. In any emerging growth industry, that's what happens.
The fact is, in the M&A space, you're looking at opportunities for buyers now, whereas several years ago, we were looking at opportunities on the sell side, which like Zach said, it's typical for any industry, but this is a very unique and highly regulated, the highest regulated industry you could be in, and there are so many burdens that other industries don't have to deal with, so it makes it even more difficult, but it ain't going anywhere.
What do you guys see about the future of this industry? Like, So right now we have a lot of big MSOs out there, some of them healthy, some of them not. A lot of them have a significant amount of debt. You have, I see them, like you said, with M&A starting to buy into different markets, starting to expand through M&A. Are these companies going to be healthy enough, or are we going to get to a point where no access to safe banking, no access and no federal legality, no interstate commerce, that at some point when all of that finally comes down the pike, that we have Lorillard and Philip Morris and the pharmaceuticals coming in and scooping up these MSOs because they're the ones that have the checkbooks to do it. Is that a fear of anybody's?
No, I think, to be honest, well, I think, look, to be honest, safe banking is not what everyone thinks it is. Like,
It's fun to talk about.
it's fun to talk about, but here's the thing. The single biggest impediment to any advancement within the cannabis industry is the New York and Stock Exchange and NASDAQ.
Yeah.
The single biggest impediment. Those two exchanges could open up to plant touching entities if they wanted to. Twitter. Good for Twitter. They could absolutely open up, but they don't. And that's okay. That's a decision they've made. The minute that the exchanges open up, you will have a rush from all these Canadian public companies that are US operators running to uplist in NASDAQ.
Yeah.
At the same time, every CPG, every major company, Coke, Unilever, Johnson & Johnson, Procter & Gamble, RJ Reynolds, big pharma, big tobacco, they're all going to be running to buy. The reality is the biggest cannabis company in the world is still smaller than some of the smallest pharmaceutical companies in the world. Yeah. So it's a value proposition. So I don't necessarily know that it's a bad thing for a lot of these people that have been building these companies from the ground up and have been struggling and fighting for 5-10 years to get their cash out, right? I don't know it's a bad thing when the true blue chip companies that have been operating for years and years and years, public or private, however you want to look at it, have the opportunity to come in and say, I'm going to inject cash, take over your company and run it differently. You may not like the way they run it, but as a business model, that may not be a bad thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's. I don't think people realize how hard it is to buy a cannabis stock as a typical retail investor, unless you have like a nice, money management account somewhere. If you're on Robinhood, if you're on Merrill Edge or any of these entry level normal platforms,
I don't want to touch it.
You can access PSTN, you can access MSOS, but we've seen the success of those two ETFs. I don't want to talk shit, but Twitter certainly does. But you can't buy GTI, you can't buy Trulieve. And I remember way back when I first got into the industry, I called Merrill Edge because that's who I had my investment account with. I'm like, hey, I'm trying to buy Trulieve. They're like, well, that's illegal. I'm like, no, it's not. They trade on an exchange. Like, you can't buy it.
Not illegal to buy their stock.
Yeah. So, and it blew my mind. So, like, you have these publicly traded companies, but there are only certain investors that are able to access it.
Correct. And your typical retail BD in the US is so afraid of regulatory scrutiny that they just stay away from it.
Yeah.
Which is what we see in the banking industry. Because you're right. You don't need safe banking to pass for traditional financial institutions to get into this industry. Zach and I represent real banks that are now lending to the industry, but
hopefully not Silicon Valley.
Well, no. But you're very much correct. Nobody wants to touch it.
Yeah.
They don't want to have to deal with the regulators.
It's nuts working in this industry. It's like you have to be passionate about it because you probably make better money anywhere outside of it.
Any industry that could be deemed illegal at any level of government has to be an industry of passion.
Yeah.
You don't get into it knowing full well that it could end tomorrow. But the truth is, we've seen where this industry has gone. It keeps growing, and even in the downturns, it's on that path of growth. And like Zach said, even if that growth means that everybody folds into a Philip Morris, you're still going to have cannabis on the market for the masses, which is still the ultimate endpoint of that growth, whether it's a big MSO getting there or an even bigger non-cannabis company taking it over. It's still cannabis nationwide.
I don't want those people at our events.
Yeah,
No,
well, they won't be.
Like, it's the Chicken Little thing, right? You have to understand that the way this industry is, that this isn't Chicken Little. The sky isn't falling, right? This is literally, it's cyclical. In 2 years from now, we'll be looking back on this going, remember that when? I mean, 3 years ago.
There may be some new faces when we're doing that.
No, but you remember 3 years ago, Green Growth Brands was one of the biggest companies in the country. 3 years ago, MedMen was one of the biggest companies in the industry. right? It's completely
true.
but it's completely
Yeah.
cyclical,
Yeah, yeah,
right? You know, people grow, then they collapse. They grow, they collapse. That's a business cycle. That happens normally. I mean, it sucks when you're riding out the roller coaster. Don't get me wrong, you know, but yeah, we're gluttons for punishment.
Absolutely.
But look at what we're doing for the psychedelic industry. We're paving the way.
We are. Because for some reason, everybody seems that the world seems more accepting of psychedelics. Is that because they're not Schedule One substances for the most part, or because guys in white coats are telling people that it's okay?
I would say the latter.
Yeah. It's got more pharmaceutical recognition. I think, look, so the US cannabis market skipped the research and development phase and went straight to commercialization.
By necessity.
Right. You look at it like a country like Israel, right?
wasn't
Israel
upset
went
about
straight into research and development,
Yes.
forgot how to commercialize it. You know, when it comes to psychedelics, they treated it like big pharma, like
Yeah.
any kind of pharmacological, right? It's I'm identifying an enzyme, a protein, a specific strain or a specific varietal of a product to treat one specific condition. Whereas cannabis, they said, here's the whole plant, and the whole plant's going to treat everything.
So I don't. Yes, I want to switch away from that because you're 100% right. Like I feel that I mean I do this on this show. We do this in our group. We focus on the call it medical, but really recreational side of the business, which is buying cannabis to consume in the same way that it's been consumed traditionally through prohibition and everything else. But the industry is so much bigger than that, that there is a real medical component. We interviewed a guy today that's working on that as well, too. I'm not a big fan of the synthesized stuff, but if what gets through, how far away, and I don't know if you guys look at this, but I think the one thing that's going to have the biggest economic impact on this country and the biggest beneficial, if we can figure it out for everybody else, is industrial hemp. Are people still making waves there? Because, you know,
I think that's one of the biggest lost opportunities.
100%.
But
it's revolutionary.
I think we're heading in the right direction again by necessity because, well, what we're seeing in Florida is there may be a literal kibosh on the hemp industry in Florida from a cannabinoid perspective, right? Now what you're seeing with Delta 8 and Delta 10, people are going to have to
YMCA.
and YMCA.
But the lost opportunity, though,
is on the industrial side.
Yes.
And what I'm saying is now you have so many thousands of acres of cultivation and people aren't going to be able to sell it for cannabinoids, and people are going to start recognizing the industrial applications of hemp, which were around for generations.
This
I used to
Model
joke-
T's fenders were made out of hemp.
I used to joke with you all the time, right? How many times you walk into Starbucks and you get one of those paper straws?
The worst.
Right. Why not take,
We never started that
Plastics.
hemp straw business, did we?
no, but straws, plastics, utensils, anything like that, non-ingestible hemp products, you could easily be doing it in a more environmentally friendly way, using what are ultimately byproducts from the CBD industry is essentially low-hanging fruit, right? The reality is take someone who's a plastics manufacturer, invest money into converting their machinery, and you can literally take industrial hemp, like John is saying, and start using it for tangible products that are non-ingestible, that have longer lasting, less regulated.
Starbucks, we're coming for you. This group right here, we're gonna figure it out.
No shortage of hemp in Seattle.
We just need green hemp straws, and they'll buy them from us.
Indeed.
Seriously, whoever does that and figures it out and then gets a Starbucks contract, I'd like a piece of it, and then we can retire.
I mean, if Starbucks gets taken, I'll default to like McDonald's or something. But no, I agree. And it's funny because we look at this country, and it's no surprise we're in an economic downturn, and we look at what has kept this country as a superpower for so long. It's being ahead of industries, and technology sustained us for so long. But the problem with technology is you need to have a specialized skill set to be part of technology. Yes, you can be a salesperson or an accountant or something else like that, but for the most part, they're engineering jobs, they're coding jobs, and you don't need to have a 4-year degree. You can go to a trade school to learn that, but you do need to have a specialized skill. It is not just anyone off the street can come in and do it. We look at industrial hemp, and it brings back farming, manufacturing, transportation, logistics to this country. It is something that hits on everything that the media wants to see: sustainable, reusable.
And it's not like those are new skill sets.
No.
This country is, this is an agriculture country.
Yes. So to me, as much as I love the recreational side of it, I love that I can walk into a store like a human being and buy cannabis products, pre-rolls, eighths, what have you, even like I was talking to Jamie Cooper of Sensi, the El Blunto, which is one of my favorite products, because
Drop that.
what's that?
Just drop that thing.
She's a friend. I can drop names whoever I want. But I love being able to buy those products. I forget how obsessed and enthralled I am with the industrial hemp side of things. And I hope that we see, especially here in Florida, a movement forward in that, because I think that is something just that the country can benefit as a whole. And it blows my mind that from what I can tell, and I try to avoid the news as much as I can, you don't see a politician that is bringing that to the forefront, and that really surprises.
Well, I'll tell you, the problem is it's a lot more complicated than that, right? Yeah, the industry can create those jobs, but then
But I'm a podcaster, so it's not.
well, not only that, I mean, you need a company to then hire those people, give them benefits, give them wages that fall in line with US labor standards that can be paid less elsewhere. You can have a farm and farm hemp in Central America, South America, overseas, and they can grow it, process it, and send it over to America for less than it would cost to hire people and do that here. So it becomes even more political. How do you create the incentives to put those jobs here, right? So it's more than just the industry. We have the industry, it's here already. Hemp has been legalized by the Farm Bill. I mean, short of, officers showing up and burning it all because it looks and smells like cannabis, even though it's hemp.
It's cannabis.
It's cannabis. Exactly. And so it's more than just, tapping an untapped market. It just like everything else in this country, it's tied to the politics of everything else behind starting and operating a business.
As always, but I do believe that there has not been an emphasis on industrial hemp.
Yeah.
And by the way, that was buried years ago for political reasons as well. So nothing has changed. Technology has changed. That's about it.
And I apologize, being a special guest, I actually got to run to another meeting, and I'm going to leave you and let you know that it's 4:20.
I'm going to let you guys go here. Yeah, the only company I know that's doing it, Poseidon invested in a company called Bassboard out of Alabama.
Yeah.
And they're doing textiles and hemp, and I'm excited to see what they do.
Yep.
Yeah.
But gentlemen, this has been fun. We'll have to do it again sometime. Thanks.
Another
for stopping
3 years.
by. Yeah, another 3 years.
Always
Thanks.
good to see you,
Pleasure.
John.
We actually got to use Rob as our producer here, so always great. to
That's
have
why
you
it
guys.
was such a shitty app.